Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhodge. Thanks again for tuning in again this week. Today, I have a special, I would say, friend, Jennifer Spear, with us today. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi, Roxanne. Happy to be here with you.
So, Jen, I often say she makes people play in the moment when you're together with her, and she owns a business that's called Unscripted. So we're going to talk a little bit. Our topic today is just going to talk a little bit about problem solving and what you do in the moment when you're unscripted, which is Jennifer's expertise. But we're going to talk a little bit also about some amazing research that she has just been kind of getting out there into the world. So Jen, let's talk a little bit about the uncertainty that we've been living in. And I think, I would say that a lot of us are kind of getting tired of talking about it, but I think it's something that's now we're seeing the shrapnel associated with that uncertainty. So what was it like for you personally or professionally in the last 2 years with that uncertainty with the pandemic?
Yeah, thanks, Rox. It has been something. It's been something for everyone. Prior to the pandemic, when I talked about being unscripted, if I was doing a keynote, I might have said something like, what if everything changed? What if you could no longer work the way you've always worked? And then 2020 came and we couldn't. And so it very quickly went from what if to what now, and understanding that. And recognizing that, anytime we face any kind of change or anything new, there's uncertainty. And for most people, that uncertainty can be uncomfortable, right? And that's what can get us to stop or to resist change. But when COVID happened, we didn't have a choice. There was a lot of uncertainty that was happening, but we all had to be able to react. And some people have been able to cope or to get through it a little bit better because of that being comfortable with uncertainty and recognizing that, over the last 2 years, things, it constantly changed and things are going to continue to change, which means we just have to get good at it. And that really is about being comfortable with the uncertainty, being comfortable accepting the situations as they are, and then being able to move through them and get through that uncertainty to the other side.
That's such a good point, right? Because I think if we were to back up and look at change is a constant that we've always known, but we never want to accept that things are consistently changing. Human beings, even when you see children play, right? If you give kids a bucket full of different shapes, what the first thing they do is they try to kind of collate and put, the circles together, the squares together, all that stuff. So as human beings, we're constantly trying to make sense of things if they don't fit a category. And the pandemic, I think, truly showed us for the first time, glaringly obvious, that we really have what little control we really do have. And like to your point, some of us thrive potentially, not that we're looking for change, but we're able to kind of keep up with change, and other people get completely shut down. And, that's why I find it fascinating when we look at what's happened to some people that have thrived and pushed through the pandemic, and other people, if they were struggling with certain things, those struggles kind of became exponential by 10, where they kind of got more frozen. So if you think of your work in the kind of the concept of, I was privileged to spend was about almost 2 months ago now. We went away on a retreat together, and we did some improv games together, which was fascinating. So in your world, when you're now or during the pandemic, when you were talking about that uncertainty, how do people, or how did people deal with that concept of being unscripted?
So unscripted, it has a number of different meanings for me, but really it's based on the principles of improv and problem solving. And if you're familiar with improvisational theater, um, in a in a nutshell, what happens there is two or more people come up on stage without a script, and they create something on the spot that you would have sworn was rehearsed in advance. And the reason it works is because there's rules improv that every improviser knows. And so by sharing these rules and skills of improv, it means that we can become comfortable with uncertainty, because an improviser has no idea what's going to happen to them, right? When they go to work, when they get there, it's a dark stage. There's no script, no costumes, no props, and they have no clue what's going to happen. And that is so exciting, because that uncertainty and ambiguity represent opportunity. And so one of the basic principles of improv is we talk about accepting all offers. So anything that is done, said, or brought into an improv scene is considered an offer, and it's your job to accept it, right? So you cannot block or deny an offer. And so COVID or any big change is really just an offer. It doesn't have to be a threat. And so if you are able to accept that offer, accept the circumstances that you're in. And then another principle of improv is to say yes and, right? So you accept it and then you build on it and you move it forward in a positive way. Well, then we're able to take the situation and move forward. And so we're certainly seeing people who, when COVID happened, that they started to shut down, and others saw it as an opportunity. So an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to do new things. And you alluded earlier the research that I did, and so my partner Angela Muzzo and I just embarked on a major research study, which we're super excited about, and it was studying the impact of COVID on the human condition. And we were able to take a segment or identify 5 segments within the population. And if we look at these segments across how they reacted to COVID, we go from being incapacitated on one end to being inspired on the other. And there is a group of people that were inspired by COVID. And by no means am I saying, that it was a good thing. There were horrible things that happened during COVID. So I'm not making light of it, but to recognize that it was an opportunity. And these people took opportunities in their personal lives by connecting more with family or connecting with neighbors, creating new relationships, or in their businesses, seeing an opportunity to do things differently. And, whether it's what you do, how you do it, or who you do it with, but seeing those opportunities. Um, I know, Roxanne, from your background, you're probably very familiar with post-traumatic stress, but there's also post-traumatic growth that can happen for both individuals and companies, and we're seeing some of that now. So those that were able to come through the change, come through the uncertainty, and accept that situation and build on it, those are the ones that we're seeing that are thriving. And I think it's really important to understand those folks so that we can help everybody else along. Um, we know from the research that 60% of the population are not doing so well. They're either struggling or they're suffering, but there are 40% that are thriving. And so if we can understand them, we can help the others along. And that's really got to be our goal, right? To want everybody to be able to thrive as we're coming out of this and to be strong the next time we're facing, some sort of challenge or change in the world.
It's interesting that you say that, right? Because, of course, in my world and in my early career, when I dealt with trauma, so of course, like when I worked with the police, what would happen is we would respond to a crime, something has happened. And I saw every iteration of that 60-40%, where something someone's life has just automatically changed within seconds. And we would go in as a trauma team, and quite literally you would see people that could distance, and I often say creating a gap where they can say, well, I know this is really, really tough right now. However, this is how I can kind of look at things a little bit differently. So the concept of post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth it's real, but sometimes some people get so shut down that they are almost like catatonic, to the point where other people are able to say, well, wow, this is happening, but I can see that maybe this, and this is a possibility. Or, right now I know I'm very, very sad. However, I know that I'll be able to get out of this. And it's so true. And there often are factors associated with both groups. So let's talk about some of the other qualities or things that you found in this data, because I think that's going to be fascinating. With what we need to know, like you said, if 40%, this 40% bucket is thriving, wow, don't we need to know a lot more about these people so that we could dissect it, understand their cognitions, their emotions, what kind of things they've done to take care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did in the research was we partnered with some academics and used their models in our research. So we know that these are tried, tested, and true. So we looked at values, overall well-being and flourishing. We looked at resilience, curiosity, and then we were able to bring those models in together. So not just being able to see overall life satisfaction on one model, but being able to combine that with overall well-being. And so it was fascinating. And then taking all of that and being able to see, well, how are we reacting within COVID? And so there are 40% of the population that are thriving. We also have 40% of the population that you would consider high resilience, high copers is what the BRCS model would define them as. So being able to cope with uncertainty. And so it's both 40%, but it's not necessarily the same 40%. And when we look at those two together, it's actually only 13% of the population that are both thriving and highly resilient.
Interesting.
And when we look at that overall well-being piece, so those that are thriving, that are also doing really well on their well-being, which means their overall physical and mental health, their social health. So in terms of their social supports and their relationships, their financial health, they did better during COVID as well. And so they're coming out just better overall and their overall well-being. It was also really interesting to see in terms of how they reacted with COVID. And so those that are thriving, those that were inspired during the pandemic, actually had a lower incidence rate of COVID as well. And if they did get COVID, they had milder symptoms, right? Those on the other side, those that you were describing who get shut down by it, they actually had worse overall health and well-being. They had higher negative health manifestations as well, more likely to get COVID, and more likely to have more severe relationship or reactions to it, more severe symptoms. And then we looked at their behaviors during COVID, and so those that were struggling through it were more likely to isolate themselves, to binge watch, but to binge watch at the expense of their relationships. Whereas those on the inspired side, they were less likely to binge watch, but it was probably because they were just doing more. They were spending more time in nature. They were doing things in their community. They were creating relationships with others. And that was overall influencing their overall well-being and mental health, which was overall influencing how they were behaving during COVID. It was just incredible to see the differences within these groups. One I will say one positive thing I would say for everybody is one of the things that came out in the research is that the more resilient you are, the more resilient you will be. And the fact that we've all had to go through this incredibly challenging time, if we're able to get through it and learn from it, we're going to be more resilient in the future. And I think that's positive for everybody. And if we can, again, accept those circumstances and be able to push through, that's where we're going to see the positive on the other side. And so as leaders, it's something that we can do to help our people through this, to recognize those that are maybe struggling and help them be able to uh, work through the discomfort and get through the uncertainty to be able to learn on the other side, because that's where we're seeing the biggest difference, are those that are able to learn through the resistance.
See, that's just interesting with my psychological background, right? Because if you think about it, right, in the data with staying at work and what keeps people away from work, generally 65% of it is relationships across the board nationally, right? So if you think about that, and oftentimes people think it's mental health or, it's generally couples relationships, family relationships, and some kind of connection, right? So even if you look at that, and I often say that we're mammals, Jen, right? What do we need? We lost the ability to be face to face, front and center with people that we normatively would be around. All of a sudden, boom, that was gone. So the opposite of that is what I say is reptilian, which is the turning away from, the shutting down, right? And I often say, even though we're on camera, which is not ideal, we still have that connection of that mammalian element. Versus the opposite is, if I'm shutting down, I'm thinking, I don't want to do this interview today, Jen. What are we going to talk about? I'm going to worry, and I'm going to back away, which is kind of what you're saying with this 13 percenters, right? It makes sense. And a lot of my coaching, I see the same traits with people, because they are either saying, wow, this is pretty cruddy. But what can I do? And the other people that are really struggling are saying, what they would litanize for me is what everything that's wrong, and what is possibly going to go wrong, and what is going to be on the horizon, right? So again, that mindset shift between the two subsets. So in that 13%, I'm curious about them. What were you able to kind of parse out some of the mindset elements for that 13% of those people?
Yeah, for sure. They were wonderfully more likely to be unscripted as well, which is great news. But what they did was they would look for creative ways to alter difficult situations, right? So they accept the situation that they're in, but they were able to be their own self-direction and be able to choose how they were going to respond in it. And they truly believe that whatever happens to them, they can choose how they respond to it. And so that feeling that some people had in terms of feeling that it's hopeless because they were not in control of their situation, regardless of the situation, regardless of the constraints, we can still control how we respond within it. And so that is so important, that autonomy, being able to bring your own creativity and choosing what it is that you do. They certainly believe that they can grow in positive ways, and they actively would look to replace the losses that they experienced. And, I was thinking as you were talking there, Roxanne, in terms of those social relationships and how do you do it online? I mean, you be creative in it. And so you and I are part of a group that I think is a fabulous example of this. Is right at the start of COVID, we came together in this writing group, and we meet every morning to be able to connect and to be productive. And it started out, it was going to be, a few months, because how long could this thing last, right? And now we've already been 2 years in it. We're still meeting every single morning as often as we can with this group, and we've created this connection with people on a what might have started on we were all working on a similar activity. Well, then we developed like an emotional connection with everybody as well, and how important that is. And so we are seeing that within the 13%, those that actively sought out either to strengthen relationships that they already had or to build new ones. And embracing this online world in terms of, because there are some good things that come out of this, because it allows us to be able to connect with more people more often. But we are feeling, the Zoom fatigue for sure. It's a real thing. And being able to connect with people again in person is going to be important. But we're seeing anxiety around that too, in terms
Mhm.
of we got used to one thing and now we have to change again. And when is the next shoe going to drop? And instead of seeing this change as a threat, it's an opportunity. And I think we have an opportunity to bring the best of both together, right? Being in person and online.
And that's so important because, and now I'm trying to think there's 10 or 11 of us. And initially it was like, oh, geez, I got to write this book. That was the thought, right? And okay, we have to put structure in our day. Initially, I think that was the beginning with most of us, because I think some people had gone through deficits in their business as upwards of 50 to 60%. But what started to happen after a while, it was like, I have this commitment, and I don't know what your thought. And I thought, oh boy, I can't not show 3 days in a row. And then after a while, these are phenomenal women, I should tell you. But we started to be to each other's support system unknowingly, which was amazing. And of course, what happens in lives? We have, sicknesses, unfortunately, births, people moving, lots of things in that 2 years. And even though we were online, we really created a depth of connection that was amazing to watch. And I can tell you, as a psychotherapist, I was part of it, but I wasn't there in any other realm other than I was a human being that was as much need of connection as everybody else. So you're so right. If you're looking at it and we look at the pandemic, the people that I've coached or continue to coach are the ones that are saying, well, I can't have dinner with my family, but I have a friend, and through COVID, what she did is she had lunch every single day with her elderly parents in the backyard. And whether it was a sandwich, which was really quick, they had that connection because her elderly parents lived with her. Or my girlfriend, a friend of mine who lives right in my neighborhood, every single day through COVID, thick or thin, through the golf course in the snow, we walked for over an hour every single day. I have never explored my neighborhood in that way at all, Jen. So the positives, that 13%, you could see, if these are some of the examples of things people have done, how amazing they would have thrived through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing those that are doing the best from it. Also, in terms of their values overall, their focus was on self-transcendence and openness to change. And both of those is more of a focus on others. So it goes from a me to a we focus. And so by focusing on others and wanting to help others, that can help bring us up as well in terms of, that thriving, in terms of the positive outlook and being optimistic. And so we're seeing those that are on the highest end, that focus from me to we. The ones on the lower end, they're more about trying to avoid anxiety as opposed to moving towards something. They're trying to move away from something, and their focus is definitely more on themselves, on self-protection, focus on their highest values being around safety and security. And that makes sense. And for a lot of people, we were financially impacted by the pandemic. And so when you're hit at those core levels, which can impact so many other things, it makes sense that we're going to be focused on our own personal safety and security and how are we going to get through this. And once we feel comfortable in that area, then we're able to rise above and look at other things and focus on other people. So we are seeing there is a difference on the financial side as well. And just hoping that as everyone starts going back to work, and we've seen a lot of industries that are opening up again, to be able to work in different ways, I think is going to be extremely positive as well. And speaking of work, The one thing that came out of this study, which has come out of every single study I have read through all of this, is that people want to work from home. And so it's recognizing that again as leaders in our work, when we're thinking about our teams and our employees, the ability to be flexible is going to be a key to retention right now. I certainly believe it. Time is the new luxury, and people have recognized how much time they've saved by not commuting and what they could use that time for. And if we can help them see that saved time as a way that they can use that to build relationships or take on a creative hobby or to get out in nature and to exercise, then we will be able to help them in terms of their overall well-being and help them be able to thrive as well.
So for leaders and people in organizations, from some of this data, what are some of the things that leaders should be thinking about? They should be, like you said, being creative with flexibility. Their benefits programs should accordingly, I would say, mirror what kind of things that they should be offering to people. Flex times. I think of the counter side of this as well. Also, leaving the house is something that maybe building that into your return to work policy as well, right? So don't assume that everybody wants to be home all the time, but to make it kind of creative enough. I know some environments have had it so that because they're trying to maintain that connection, is to also have their, say, maybe quarterly meetings or something in person. These are some of the things that I've heard. What are some of the other things that you think leaders should be thinking about with some of the research?
Yeah, flexibility is definitely key. If people can feel that they have more control or more autonomy over their schedules and how they do things, one of the biggest frustrations that we see is that people being told you have to go back to work, and then they spend their entire day on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, and that could have been done from home. So thinking about the things that can be done as easily from home if people prefer that, and what needs to be done in person. And we know, that connection piece in terms of being with people, you can't replicate it online. You truly need to be in person, but there's a lot of tasks that we can do as well, if not even better, online or at home when we're able to focus and concentrate. Now, there were times during this pandemic when the entire family was at home, and so that would have been challenging as well. And so you would have to be able to negotiate that. But I think if leaders are able to, um, when they're asking people to come back to work, if it makes sense, if it seems like it's a reasonable request because we're going to be able to do something with it, and that it's respectful of the people's time and energy and what it is that they need to do, I think that's key. The other big one we're really seeing is everywhere. We have an issue around trust, and trust has been broken in a big way for a lot of people. One of the really interesting questions that we had within the study was we used idioms or common phrases, and we asked people which of these phrases have more meaning to you since the pandemic. And the number one phrase that came up was "Don't believe everything you hear." And
Interesting.
right, and then we were able to ask people to tell us why. So we have, 2,000 verbatims on why these are important phrases or why they have more meaning to them. And with that one, it really comes down to trust being one of the main themes that came out of that. So as leaders, I can't overemphasize how important it is to communicate clearly, consistently, do what you say you're going to do, support your employees, support your teams in the way that you can. Everything that we do either builds or breaks trust, and right now it's pretty broken, and so we have to do a lot of work to be able to bring that up. In certain industries, we know have to do a lot of that work to get their customers, their clients, or their members back as well, right? So I think there's a lot of work to do there.
For sure. And if you think about it, in my new book, ROR, Return on Relationships, I talk a lot about trust. And from a psychological end, psychological safety is about consistency, small steps. So gone are the days where we can kind of look at the mission, the vision, the strategic plan. It's like kind of like, okay, what is the living plan so that you can reestablish trust if you've broken it, because a lot of companies didn't do it well. They went virtual. Managers that were managing not so well kind of did worse. Well, now they had, people kind of east to west coast. So there is I think it's looking at things objectively. To your point, where are we at? Don't start all of a sudden start to do, picnics and get-togethers if you haven't addressed the issues that kind of were left behind prior to the pandemic. Figure out the steps, take a pulse, figure out how you're going to gather that data, and then figure out what are some simple little things that you can start to do to let people know we may have screwed up a little bit back there, and we're human too, and we were scared as well. However, this is what we learned, and help us understand how we're going to take those next steps. I think that becomes very, very important, because without that transparency, the capacity to start to develop trust again is kind of, it's lost.
Absolutely. And you nailed it, Roxanne, in terms of that transparency and also that vulnerability to say, we might have gotten it wrong. We did make some mistakes. This was new for all of us. I mean, none of us have worked through a global pandemic before. It is pretty amazing. And so we have to, go easy on ourselves as well, but recognizing that we have an opportunity to make it better, to improve, to grow, and to be able to help our employees do this. And recognizing what a big piece work is in the rest of our lives. And especially if people are working from home. I mean, now work is in our homes. And the more we can be positive and help them on the work side, that's going to move over to their home life, and in terms of helping their overall well-being and life satisfaction. And so the more we can do this and support our people, the stronger we're all going to be moving through this and ready, for the next change, and seeing it as an opportunity and more than a threat.
Well, I'm excited about your research, and I'm sure there's leaders out there thinking, all right, how do we talk to this lady? And about, it's called the Chaos Lab, is her new business that has the research. And so where can people reach out to you, learn more about it? And just, I'm sure I'm thinking about, companies that could potentially look at that from some of our conversations. So tell people a little bit about Chaos Lab and kind of what are you going to do with all this amazing stuff, and where they might be able to reach you to be able to consult about some of this.
Thanks, Roxanne. I'm so super excited about this. So this new adventure is a joint venture between me and my partner, Angela Muzzo, Chaos Lab. And our first work that we did together is this study, which we're calling Chaos to Clarity. And so it's really fresh. I mean, we launched this study on the second anniversary of when the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic. And so that was significant in terms of being 2 years into this and really understanding the impact on people's values and behavior, and how is that going to impact us at work. So we're excited to be sharing the results. And this today was a little bit of a sneak preview. We're having our first reveal of some of the information on June 23rd. And we'll have information about that on our website, which is still fresh. I mean, the ink is dripping off the screen a little bit, but it's chaoslab.org. But you can always reach out to me as well. And it's jspear@workunscripted.com. We're going to be posting information on the website, but also on LinkedIn and the other social networks. So I'm super excited about being able to share it with you, Roxanne, and really looking forward to working with leaders and teams and organizations to be able to bring this information to life, and what can we do with it to help everybody learn and grow and be able to face uncertainty with courage and confidence.
Absolutely. And post-traumatic growth, right? So with what I talk about with leaders, I tell them the more they're connected to themselves and really getting a sense of how to maneuver through change in this case, then they're able to impact others around them. So which is, I think this, 13% on the data can help us, because the more we learn about these individuals, then in turn we can, set up trainings or potential ways to people that maybe would like to acquire these skills or accentuate these skills can learn these things and be able to implement them in their peer groups or their different teams, all those things. So I think this is a fascinating research. And again, thanks so much for letting us get a little bit inside information about it before the June 23rd. So for anybody wanting more, again, all this information will be in the show notes, and you can reach out to Jen at any point. So for anyone listening that really wants to learn about authentic leadership, like, how am I doing with all this stuff? Just reach out. As you can see below my name, you can see roxannedurhodge.com. It's a quiz. You can say, you may say, hey, it's not at work, I want to look at home. All you do is fill out this little fun quiz. It'll pop you back the information, and you'll know kind of where you benchmark in reference to things like communication, transparency, connection, all those good things. So again, Jen, thanks so much for your time. For everybody listening, thank you so much for hanging out with me every single week.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.